On the table, building long-term hunger solutions in the East Bay. This is such an important conversation, and I'm grateful everyone is in this room caring enough to be a part of it. Today's program is focused on food, but it's also about something much bigger. It's about equity, justice, and systems change. At TVNPA, we know that hunger does not happen in isolation. It's connected to housing affordability, wages, healthcare, transportation, and public policy. So while food is our focus this morning, the conversation could just as easily be about housing or any number of other issues affecting our most vulnerable neighbors. We also know that when public supports become harder to access, the people who are already struggling feel the impacts first and most deeply. This is one of the reasons this conversation matters so much. We have to keep looking beyond short-term response and asking what it will take to create long-term structural solutions. And that's what we're here today for. So I want to say how much I appreciate seeing so many nonprofit leaders, community partners, advocates, and supporters with us this morning. These conversations matter, and they matter even more when the right people are in the room together. Before we begin, I'd like to take a moment to recognize okay, so I think we have Vice Mayor Christy Wong here this morning. I don't see Evan Granny. He will probably pop in. So when he walks in, everybody look and say, hi, Evan. We also, Lauren, how are you here? And Tamara from the Town's office. Oh, the register. Okay. But at this point, we're pleased to have Alameda County Supervisor Harper's office with us here today. I'd like to invite Sean Wilson to share a few brief remarks about why this issue is important for the Supervisor's office.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to say that unfortunately the Supervisor can't be here today. He is down south celebrating his grandson's first birthday. He was here. And one thing he wanted me to tell you is that the work that you do in our community, in District 1, and by the way, welcome to District 1, the work you do is invaluable. We hear all the time that services aren't needed much in the Tri-Valley because they're okay. But that's not the case. You all know that there's needs here, and we just really appreciate you being a vital piece of bread in the Alameda County fabric that keeps us all working together and serving the people that we represent. So thank you for what you do, and look forward to a deep discussion today. Thanks for having me.
All right. So where am I? Okay, so first I'm going to tell you about a few upcoming TVNPA events that I want you to be aware of. We've got a lot going on. I'm super excited about it. Okay, so next Saturday, April 25th, we're co-hosting with Las Vegas College the LPC Run for Higher Education and Tri-Valley Nonprofits. This is a family-friendly event built around a theme that every nonprofit is a superhero. Everyone who registers will get a t-shirt and a cake, and you can bring your dogs. I don't think they're cats. And it's a 5-mile run walk and a 1-mile run walk beginning at 9 a.m. and it's followed by a community marketplace. It's a great way to support our local nonprofits while celebrating health, wellness, and community. And the plan is, like this year, we're supporting a dozen nonprofit organizations. So when people register, they can select a nonprofit that they want a portion of the proceeds to go to. Our plan is to grow this and to be able to support as many nonprofits as we can handle. So, but this is our test year. So come out, support our nonprofits. They're great organizations, and as you know, anytime we can bring the community together to build awareness of our nonprofits, it's just an opportunity I would hate to see missed. And then on May 7th, from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. today at Theater, we'll be hosting our annual Grant Makers Forum, Funding and Focus, Priorities and Possibilities. And one thing we try to do each year is to bring in like a new slate of organizations. This year, we have the California Endowment, East Bay Community Foundation, and the San Francisco Foundation, along with a few of our local funders. The program will explore funder priorities, how nonprofits can build stronger relationships with grant makers, and how both sectors are navigating a rapidly changing political and economic climate. And we hope you'll join us for that. It is free and open to anyone who's interested in attending. On Thursday, June 18th, one of my favorite speakers, Dr. Olivia Hughes Evans, our program will be on board engagement. So it's the work between the meetings, activating board engagement that actually moves the mission. So we hope you will be there for that. And then finally, on June 29th, Chris Carter, one of my favorite fundraisers, will be our speaker that day. And the topic is, this is his choosing, I have to say it correctly, philanthropic phobia, something like that. So it's getting over your fear of fundraising with a strong plan. So we have some great programs coming up. We would love to see you there. And now it's my pleasure to introduce the Chair of Tri-Valley Nonprofit Alliance Board of Directors, Marty Sutton, who will introduce you.
I think Kathy and I are both struggling with allergies this morning. Thank you all for being here. I am so glad to see so many of you here today. This is a program on food justice. I'm excited about this program because we as a community need to rethink how we view poverty in our communities and how we can change to pull people out of poverty. We chose to discuss income inequality through the lens of food inequality. People experiencing poverty struggle with essentials like healthcare, safe and affordable housing, and access to nutritional meals. Healthcare and housing are very important, but they are complicated issues that have built-in systems that are complex and leveled in with many different bureaucratic layers. Food is simple. We all need to eat. You all had breakfast this morning. Food is a part of our cultures. It is a part of our celebrations with friends and family. Food is around us all around us every day. And at the surface level, we know how to feed people. As my good friend John Bowe says, we have food banks on every corner. They're called grocery stores. You and I walk into a grocery store and we buy groceries. But for some of our community members, they don't have that luxury. As SNAP benefits continue to get cut and food prices rise, many people are struggling to feed their families every day. Why is this? Why in one of the richest countries in the world do we have people that can't afford a healthy meal? Today we are going to explore how we got to this place, what each of you can do to make changes, because we want you to leave here today with an understanding of where we are at, what changes each of you can make, and most importantly, we want you to leave here with hope, because hope fuels change. Without hope, we are stagnant. I have the honor of introducing our keynote speaker who's going to start us off today. I met Dr. Sheila Burks several years ago when she presented Bridges Out of Poverty to the Human Services Commission in the city of Livermore. Her presentation has stayed with me all these years, and I still reference the mental models of poverty. When TVNPA relaunched the Anti-Poverty Collaborative, we asked Sheila to be our first keynote speaker, and she presented on housing. And to this day, I think about the Alameda County redlining maps in 1920 are the same maps of poverty in 2022. Sheila joined the Alameda County Community Food Bank in 2010 after a professional career. And currently she is Director of Equity and Access and Belonging. Sorry, Sheila. Sheila collaborates with staff and community partners to develop and advocate for policies and practices that address the root causes of hunger, including racism. Every time I hear Sheila speak, I know that I will not only learn something new, but I will walk away with information that will stay with me for years to come. So I'm very, very proud today to have Ms. Sheila Burks here today to speak with us.
Good morning.
Good
morning. Oh, that was nice. Normally I have to say something to folks a couple times because I know that it's coffee outside. My name is Sheila. And the way I like to introduce myself is, my name is Sheila. I work at Alameda County Community Food Bank, and I am not here to keep you comfortable. Change does not come from a place of convenience and comfort. We're going to talk about that. Nor does change come from a place of blame, shame, and guilt. This is not what today is about. We're going to have a conversation about justice. Because if you walk out of here knowing nothing else, understand this. Food is not insecure. It is very secure. It's not about a shortage of food. And food banks alone cannot provide all of the food resources people need. A bag of groceries is not going to cure hunger or end poverty. We understand that. I hope you will too. We're going to tell a story about how we got here to the current social arrangement. We call it a racial and social arrangement that we've arrived at. But first, I want to challenge us to embrace Brian Stevenson's call to action. He said, so you want to be a justice warrior. There's a couple of things you need to know for this, a dress code, if you will, for the call to action. First and foremost.
I'm sorry, do you mind using the mic?
Oh, sure. Y'all can't hear me?
I know. I think the acoustics in here.
Oh, okay, sorry. Is that better?
Yes.
There we go. Brian Stevenson says, first you have to get close to the problem. You've got to get proximate to the problem. It's not enough to know about it. It's not enough to have done your research on it. You really have to be able to distinguish what is the root cause of the problem. Because if not, we marked 40 years of existence for Alameda County Community Food Bank last year. We've been distributing food in the county for 40 years. The need has not gone down. This is not about a bag of groceries. Pre-pandemic, we were helping 1 out of every 6 people who lives in Alameda County. Now we help 1 out of every 4. So when you leave here today, wherever you go over the weekend throughout Alameda County, count off every 4 people. That's a client of somebody in this room and a food bank. You got to get close enough to the problem to be able to correctly diagnose the problem if you want to solve the problem. Yeah. So he says you got to get close to the problem, not just know about it, not just know of it, not just hear about it from somebody else, but do your research. Be impacted by the problem. Second thing you have to do is you have to change the story you tell about it. That's what Marty was talking about earlier. Mostly, if someone is struggling with poverty, they're probably going to have to go to social services at some point to avail themselves of some services. Think about this. If instead of saying, who do you see when you go to social services? We have appointments with who? Case managers. Yeah. So when I hear case manager, it makes me think of there's something wrong with me. I have a deficit of some kind. I'm coming into you, you're gonna fix me, dress me up, and then send me back out. What would change if instead of saying, I'm going to see my case manager, I said I'm going to see my advocate? Would that change how maybe I think about what we're doing together? Would that change the relationship maybe, the investment we have in each other? Yeah. We need to change the story we tell, because every time I hear somebody telling a story, I'm thinking, is that your story to tell? Who's telling the story, to what audience, and for what purpose? And if it's not yours, there may not be a connection strong enough to persuade me to move. Yeah. Third thing, we've got to protect our hope. There can be no justice without hope. I'm going to talk a lot about hope today. Yeah. It's been a week, y'all. Okay. And the last thing, you have to be willing to do things that are uncomfortable and inconvenient. We don't always have the answers on justice, but we're willing to learn and move forward. Yeah. Next thing I want to think about is the framework that we're using. At the food bank, we're making a very significant shift from a charity model of food banking to a justice model. And that requires a shared understanding about how we got here. And what we're using is something that we call the groundwater analysis to explain the story, the narrative of this moment in time, to correctly diagnose the problem so that we can correctly challenge the root causes of the problem. So we think about it like a triangle. So groundwater analysis is at the base. On one side is human and people and community-centered design for change. And on the other side is organized. We're building a movement. We're getting like-minded people, committed people, dedicated people, visionary people together, because we don't have all the answers. We're really good at food distribution, but now justice requires that we work at the intersections. Yeah? So the groundwater analysis goes something like this. If you walked outside your house and you saw a fish floating belly up, say in Lake Delaware, what would you say? What fish? I wonder if that fish kept up with his school of fish. I wonder if that fish paid attention to his parents when they were teaching him how to forage in the lake. I wonder if that fish was strong enough, or maybe that fish just got lazy. But whatever happened, that fish, something must be wrong with it. It died. What would happen if we walked to the lake, same lake, and half the fish are floating belly up dead? What question would you ask then?
Environment.
What's wrong with the lake? Is there something in the water? Is it toxic? Yeah. Is it contaminated? So think about that. Fish solutions are things like bags of groceries. And if I take a sick fish, rehabilitate it, educate it, train it up, and put it back in that lake, what's going to happen to it? It's going to get sick again. Might even bring a new variety of illness to the thing because it's already overcome, right? So if I go out to all the lakes in the area, Don Pedro, San Pablo, Del Valle, Tug, all of them, if I'm going out to all the lakes, and in every single one of those lakes, which represents systems, half the fish are floating belly up dead. I'm going to have to look deeper for the problem. I'm going to have to look to the ground. On Earth, most of the water is below ground, but we don't see it, more than 95%. So what we're saying is, if we're fixing fish and throwing them back into toxic lakes that are being fed by contaminated groundwater, we're reproducing systems, even unintentionally, because we're not addressing the root cause. Does that make sense? Okay. That's what we're talking about. And let Ren Kusten, one of the favorite people in graceful, tell you differently.
At the structural level, you're understanding the relationship between those different kinds of institutions. So you understand that housing segregation, for example, affects school financing. And so housing segregation is going to generate segregation in schools, and it's going to generate uneven education for kids of color. And so if you only try to intervene in education by dealing with the education institutions, you're only going to make limited progress because we know that the housing institutions also affect what happens in schools.
Following along? Yeah, makes sense? So, so this is the map that Marty was talking about. This is a map from 1937. Financial services people, what is this map? It's a red line map, yeah? So this is a map of Alameda County in 1937. So up here is Albany, Berkeley, Oakland, San Leandro, San Lorenzo, Hayward. This is Union City, Dublin, Newark. Over here's Livermore, Fremont, and Peace. Okay. Why did we do these maps in the 30s? Why did financial institutions have maps like this? It was meant to distinguish between the good places to lend money for home ownership, for businesses, for things like that, because you're going to get paid back on those loans. Yeah. And yellow, you got to be a little more cautious. And red, you need to be maybe avoiding areas like that to lend in. Okay. So this was structured in the mid-30s. This wall is a wall in 1941 Detroit. It was built because the financial institutions were going to be building housing and investing in businesses in the white subdivision that was on the other side of the wall. But they wouldn't start building and investing until the wall was put up between the black community on this side of the wall. Somebody told me that that wall still existed. I offer to you that it's not always a wall, a physical wall. But a few years ago, we had a tragedy happen in Half Moon Bay, and during the investigation, it uncovered some really desperate circumstances that people were living in. Not too long ago, we found out some really desperate circumstances at Alameda County. So here's that map again. 1937, Alameda County. A former colleague, Cam Denny, in 2021, did a study, and he overlaid that map from 1937 of Alameda County, which is the one on top, with a map below it, which is where hunger is most prevalent in Alameda County. It's the same damn map. But hold on. It's also where asthma rates, respiratory illness is highest, educational attainment is lowest, housing burden is higher, pollution is highest, there's not as much parks and open space. It's the same map. 80 plus years later, it's the same map. Our friends at Alameda County Public Health did this graph for us. These are concentrated inequities across the county and mortality rates based by race. Okay? So red is Pacific Islander, gold is African American, deep maroon is Native American, green is white. Okay. Light blue is Latino, and deep brown is Asian, gray, I'm sorry, is Asian, and then all races. So what you can see by heart disease, cancer, COVID, and by the way, those maps I showed you with respiratory illness, pollution, all of that, COVID map is the same map. Okay? So you understand. We're talking about the healthcare there, we're talking about the education, we're talking about the housing there. All those things are related. I often tell myself that I'm going to start using this chart. These are the federal poverty guidelines for 2026. I want you to focus on family of four, $33,000. That's maybe what a shuttle driver makes people who work at the airport and drive people to the parking lots and things like that. How far would $33,000 for a family of four get you now? But these are the numbers that are used for qualifying for things like SNAP, housing vouchers, things like that. Now, normally I'd be able to give you the 2026 income limits for Alameda County, but there was some kind of glitch that happened in December and they won't be available until May 1st. So these are from last year. The median household income in Alameda County is $159,800 per household. Now, what I want you to look at, and this is I stopped having this conversation with my sister-in-law who lives in Lincoln, Nebraska. So for a family of four, household size of four in Alameda County, if you're considered low income if you make less than $125,050. Let's talk about fair market rents. Okay. So on this chart, I want you to notice how much this has increased since 2022. Okay. And focus on two-bedroom unit. I don't know many people who got $200+ dollar raise per month over the last year, but that's what happened in fair market rents. So $200 a month might be an extra roommate, or maybe I rent some space someplace. People rent out closets, living rooms that may not come with cooking privileges in the kitchen to make ends meet. Think about what happens if I'm a senior on a fixed income. Dublin is the fastest growing city in the state of California. And there's something that's happening especially in the Bay Area, that we're starting to notice that we didn't talk about before. So for example, used to be when your grown children decided they needed to come back home, maybe after college or something like that, it was for their benefit. What we're seeing now is adult children coming back home with their older parents because they can't afford to age in place, in the place of living. So the kids and the families move back home. You know anybody like that? I want you to, I'm going to bring this up really quickly. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. But what I want you to see, this is our friends at MIT came up with this living wage calculator. And they do it by county all across the nation. And what I want you to look at is by household size. This is what we call a living wage. I'm challenged with the notion of a living wage. This is the poverty wage based on those numbers I showed you before. And this is the minimum wage in Alameda County, which currently is $16.90 an hour. So this is how much it costs for a single adult raising 0, 1, and 2 children. Same for 2 adults with only 1 working and 2 working adults with children. The interesting thing about it is sometimes it doesn't always make sense for one of the parents or one of the guardians at home to go to work. If I can't pay for maintenance, transportation, and childcare, I work with somebody at the food bank who pays $2,200 a month for a 5-year-old to go to daycare. $2,200 a month. That's a rent job. That's a lot of money. People don't have choices. And maybe the choice I have for the person watching my baby may or may not be my first choice, but it's the one I'm working. So this will be in the materials that you'll get after the presentation, but I want you to take a look at this. And I also scroll down to the bottom, and I want you to see the typical wages earned by different vocations, okay? You see building and grounds maintenance, personal care service, the folks who do our hair, our nails, things like that, construction, you get the idea. So in the state of California, our friends at the Public Policy Institute of California came up with this measurement that an expense of $250 pushes 1.6 million more people into poverty. You're near poverty. We can't just talk about poverty. We have to talk about people who are maybe 1 paycheck away. During the first government shutdown, we learned that a lot of our Coast Guard and actively deployed military personnel were living paycheck to paycheck. It's a good paycheck, which is living in the Bay Area. So they were doing garage sales, food drives, and coming to the food bank for assistance. In fact, DHS showed up at the food bank again last month. They were trying to figure out ways to get the Coast Guard fed. But we're not funding DHS. 5 facts everybody should know about deep poverty in California. Disproportionate number of children are experiencing deep poverty. Last time I looked, 10-year-olds are not supposed to work. Being born into deep poverty more than doubles a child's chances of living as a low-wage adult. Adults who live in deep poverty face significant barriers to employment. My heart was broken a couple of times since I've been working at the food bank. One of those times I was doing a volunteer shift in the warehouse, and some young children, young black children from a local private school in Richmond came to volunteer. They were in 5th grade, so 10 and 11 years old. And I said, well, who do you think we work with at the food bank? Who do you think our food bank clients are? And one of the young boys looked at me and said, well, they're lazy people. Drug addicted. Don't want to work. What have we done? What have we done? And I said, actually, most of the people who are food bank clients have jobs, usually more than one. But there's only so many hours in the week that we can work. A former colleague told me once, well, Sheila, you know, we had this rental property and I I don't know why, but folks don't take care of their yards, and, you know, I work at the police department, and I do all these things with their kids on the weekend, and they're never there. I mean, do you realize people have 3 jobs, 4 jobs, a gig on the weekend? Yeah, I don't have time. When I do have time, I'm gonna spend time with my babies, or not maybe. The yard is not my priority. I'm getting some sleep. Yeah, because more than likely I have a job that requires me to be very clear-headed. Yeah. Deep poverty rises and falls depending on the strength of the safety net. Food banks, folks in the room. Without poverty supports, there'd be 4 times more people struggling with deep poverty in the state of California. So we're making a change. At the food bank, we shifted this lens that we're using to one of justice last year. And we changed our mission and our vision as we launched this new strategic plan. So now we partner with our community to end hunger and its root causes. That's a different mindset. That requires us to show up in new ways. That's not your grandparents' food. Some people might think of it as mission creep, but again, a bag of groceries or a tote of produce is not going to fix this. We know that, and we don't have all the answers. We have to be more inclusive in our approach and get more ideas from community members who are actually navigating all of these challenges. Yeah. So our shift from charity to justice is a really big deal for us. And so let's talk about some key differences in a traditional approach of food banking and where we're headed. So first and foremost, it's a top-down approach, right? Power tends to stay with the provider. So I know what's best for you. I know what you need. I know where it needs to be done. I know where service delivery needs to happen and when. So I have the answers. It's transactional. It's about meeting immediate needs. I'm not thinking about tomorrow, let alone next week, next month. It's about today, right now. It maintains existing systems and relationships, right? We work within what we have. We're not looking to dismantle or shift or move anything. And then it creates dependencies. Yeah? You need us. You'll be back next week again. Yeah. A justice model is different. A justice model, we're talking about shifting power, creating shared decision-making or shared power structures, giving agency and resources to folks who actually understand the problem most deeply. It's transformation. It builds capacity, and it actually changes the systems. Because doing it the way we were doing it, throwing the fish back into the toxic lake, hasn't been working. It challenges root causes. Truly, diagnosis does determine treatment. And if we don't diagnose correctly, our treatments are going to be ineffective. And then finally, again, we have agency and resource acts that we need to actually thrive. Because I can make choices. Trust me, most people don't want to be saved, delivered, or otherwise rescued. They want to have the agency and resources to provide for themselves and their families. That's what people want. I don't need you on my front door telling me what I need to be doing. Probably even going to work too well for either one of us. So again, the metaphor, fish solutions, yeah. If we throw them back into a toxic lake, it's going to be ineffective. It's a waste of resources eventually, because you're going to keep doing that same thing, expecting different results. You've got to get to systemic, structural change and solutions. That's what this is about. So let's think about what that means or what that might look like. This is equality, and this is justice for equity. I like this better. Equity, equality, everybody gets the same. No matter what the need is, you get a box. Whether you need the box or not, you get a box. justice or equity you get according to need to meet that goal, okay? Liberation, we tear all the fences down. There are no borders. Yeah. Now, we're a long way from liberation. But we are going to talk about justice and equity, okay? So our friends at Race Forward came up with this diagram. I like this one a lot because, take a look. What do you see when you look at this one? What do you notice? Call it out. What do you notice?
You can see the person on the right.
Yeah, the person on the right is darker skinned and at the lowest point here. Yeah. What else do you see?
Fences between them.
There's fences between them. Yeah. What else do you see? They all have the same size blocks, but the ground is actually sloped. Yeah. That's our friends at Race Forward, so that's what the actual lived experience feels like. So again, equality, everybody gets the same thing. Equity, you get according to what usually what somebody else thinks you need. Justice, we're gonna tear the fences down. Yeah. Liberation, you gotta work on that. I'm gonna send this to you, and I hope that you will watch this. It's really good. If we have time, I'll play 10 minutes of it, but for now, what I wanna do, it's been a week, y'all. The Artemis II landed safely after executing its mission last Friday, and also last Friday, a whole bunch of other stuff happened. And then over the weekend, something happened overseas that people didn't know about. And so Ashley Woodard Henderson is co-executive director of the Highlander Research and Education Foundation in Tennessee. And these were her reflections this week. Now, I'll read it for you. Viktor Orban just conceded defeat. She could have put y'all back in that. This man held power for 16 years, rigged the media, had Putin's intelligence services proposing fake assassination attempts to boost his numbers. And today, 78% of the country showed up, the highest turnout in modern Hungarian history. They didn't just beat him. They're on track for a supermajority that can rewrite the Constitution. Look at that turnout. The people who made this happen were the ones everyone had written off. Millions of Hungarians who had stopped believing the system could deliver for them. They moved. And when they moved, 16 years of authoritarian power folded. And some of the people who brought this government down were people who used to be a part of it. People inside authoritarian systems are not all true leaders. Some of them are waiting for a door. I'm not telling you Hungary is America. I'm telling you the math is similar everywhere. There are always more of us than there are of them. The question is never whether the people have power. The question is whether we build something worth moving for. Let's learn the lesson and apply the learning. Reggie, our executive director, you'll hear from him in a little bit. He says this to us, because hope is one of our values. Belonging, accountability, transparency, community, hope. Gonna have to have hope. Stuff gonna get hard. People won't always believe you. People won't always be with you. People won't always welcome you. You gotta protect our hope. So he says hope surrounds and protects our practice. So belief can endure long enough for participation to compound and for justice to become the norm. We can love each other. And I can't give up on this. Find your reason to stay in the fight. Yeah. My favorite quote from Malcolm X: don't be in such a hurry to condemn a person because he doesn't do what you do or think as you think or as fast. There was a time when you didn't know what you were thinking. So, yeah.
your phone and scan the QR code right now. We're going to have a little Q&A for Sheila. So if there are some questions that you have, and then it will appear on my phone, and then it would vote for the top questions. It's emphasized, does everything for us, and we're going to ask her the community questions up there. All right, so everyone take a moment to do that. That was very powerful. So my name is, you're like, who's this talking? My name, why are you doing that? My name is Estelle Clemens. I am with Tri-Valley Nonprofit Alliance, and I am the Director of Community Empowerment. And I have a long career in this work. I retired from the city of Oakland after 26 years in Director of Community Services. So this is work I have been doing for a long time, because I led our anti-poverty, the war on poverty, remember that? That map is reflective of, we're still fighting that war to this day, right? So something has to be done here. So structural change, we're going to more about that, how you, every one of you in this room, can make a difference. Let's see what we have here. Jennifer, do you have any questions coming up? I don't have any.
One that just came in so far. So as you're entering questions, you can also look at the questions that are being asked and upvote the ones that are of particular interest to you. So we encourage everyone to get involved with this.
Okay, my phone is just circling. Thank you so much. And I'm going to need some glasses because I can't see the slide. I know everyone's going to need that presentation because if you do any grants, that information is golden. Okay, question. What is Alameda County Community Food Bank doing to address the root causes of hunger, and how can its partners and the community get involved? Oh, that's a cute, good cue. For Hunger Day.
Ooh-wee. Thank you, Estelle. Well, I think one of the big things that we're doing is we're not thinking we have all the answers, and we're convening and inviting more people in. I often think about growing up and struggling, as a family, struggling with poverty. Who knows more about my last $5? And we're listening more. We're soliciting feedback more. We're asking questions, but mostly we're being present in community and centering community first and foremost. And then justice requires that we work at the intersections. We're a food bank. And what that means is there's often doors that are open for us for conversation that may not be open for other partners. And we can be a convener, we can be a platform, we can share resources, we can be thought partners. But we need to work with those other systems out there to build something that's truly responsive and impactful for the needs in our community, right? In January, on the 10th Annual National Day of Racial Healing, we invited Dr. Angela Davis and Erica Huggins to share with us some of their thoughts about their own experiences in social justice movements. And Dr. Davis said a couple of things that night that just stayed with me. But one of them was, if you're for food justice, you're for every kind of social justice. Because you have to be. Because a bag of groceries, a ready meal, is not the answer to this. We'll still be doing that next week, next month. At the end of the evening, we invited them, and I invite you to think about this. We've been doing this for 40 plus years, y'all. What do you want the next 40 years to look like? We don't want to be here doing this in 40 years like this. We want to be your disaster preparedness agency. We want to be your crisis readiness agency. We work with the fire department, all of those folks, yeah? In fact, we're part of the emergency response team in Alameda County, but we don't want to be people's daily resources for food. We can't even provide all the food that's needed now. It hasn't gotten any better, yeah? So I hope you'll join us. I hope you'll join the conversations. I hope you'll partner with other organizations. I hope you'll look outside your building and see, I'm not the only one at this encampment. Maybe I need to ask other folks what they're doing and how we can leverage how we show up.
Thank you. And the next question that has been posed by our illustrious audience is, there is no food shortage, but there is an issue around access to affordability. What are the priorities to address access and affordability?
We're really working hard on that. We want to make certain we're in the places we need to be. Some of the things that we need to shift are, if you're working 2 and 3 jobs, it's just the same as teachers see in school, right? For a long time, teachers may not think about, well, why is this, these parents, these guardians, the family members not showing up at PTA meetings and for all these things, because I'm working all the time, right? So making certain that we're showing up where we need to be when it's most accessible to folks in the community. We actually do food distribution sometimes, and we do a few in East Oakland. And what we've noticed is the folks who can show up between 10 and 12 on a weekday may not be the same folks we see when we do it on a Sunday or a Saturday or in the evening, right? So we need to be more mindful of that. And also, are we sharing the resources that people are actually going to use in need, right? We learned a long time ago. I remember when we first started distributing tofu. We started doing demonstrations out in the community and at the community market to show people how to use it. But when we got red cabbages in, that first total red cabbages, they weren't moving. People are used to green cabbages, right? And so we have to be in tune and listening all the time to what people are saying. What would make this more accessible? Are we using the language that needs to be used? I have another slide from our friends at Public Health that talks about all the languages that are spoken in Alameda County. Some of those languages people may not read and write in. Maybe we need to record some things. Is it a welcoming space? What we're hearing right now, people are afraid to show up in numbers at distributions. They don't feel safe. They feel exposed. It has been in the past that some communities stand in line 2-3 hours for the food resources we share. We've had to do more home deliveries, and we're thinking about how we make that happen so people don't have that stigma, don't feel like they're hunted, don't feel like they're on display and unsafe when they access needed resources.
And we have one more question before we transition. I think we have time for one more question. How can individuals, food banks, nonprofits, local governments, and the state all work together to fight the root causes of hunger? And where can partners support?
And we better. We better. We need to tear down the fences. We don't have all the answers alone. And only a government, as Tim Wise would say, with big guns, can actually solve these things. Y'all realize that in 2021, the poverty rate went down for the first time in years. Dr. King said there's nothing new about poverty. The only thing that's new about poverty is that we now have a means to fix it. What happened in 2021, post-pandemic? What happened? We had a child tax credit, we had enhanced SNAP benefits, enhanced unemployment benefits, eviction moratoriums. It's not a matter of not knowing what to do. We did it right quick and in a damn hurry. And then what happened? We took it all back. See, the government helped us drop the poverty rate. So if we're not at the table together, we're still going to be fixing fish and throwing them back in toxic rivers.
Give it up once again for our So we have more of this to come. We're building a movement here. So all of you in the room are not just happenstance. You were designed to be here for today to hear this, because it takes collective power to take that fence down, because it's been years of being there, right? We're gonna all do this together. So how you get involved, keep thinking about that. When you leave here, we wanna know what is the one thing you can do to make sure that this isn't just information you hear, but this is information that motivates you to get involved. And she's gonna introduce our next presenter.
So we're going to transition to a panel conversation where some of our partners are going to come up, and we're going to have a conversation about what's going on, what they're doing, and it's going to be moderated by Reginald Young, Executive Director of Alameda County Food Bank. Please join me in welcoming today's panel moderated by Reggie. Reggie joined Alameda County Community Food Bank as Executive Director in September 2021 and has been in food banking for more than 15 years. Reggie began his career as a community organizer. So you got that part about triangle, organizing. Working to bring technology and economic resources to neighbors in Houston, Texas. That's the biggest food bank in the Feeding America network in the country. And Feeding America is now the biggest nonprofit in the country, surpassing the United Way. Joining Reggie today are John Burks, Executive Director of Open Heart Kitchen, Christine Dillman, Executive Director of Tri-Valley Haven, and Janet Kennedy, Co-Executive Director of Loaves and Fishes in Contra Costa County. Please welcome in.
Thank you, Dr. Burks. And as our distinguished panelists get settled, can we give it up one more time for Dr. Burks? She knows this, but I always feel it's challenging to go after her and her conversations. And I feel like I need to talk more distinguished myself because she was so formal with the Reginald. I go by Reggie. Please do not call me Reginald. That is on my birth certificate, but I do not. Now, we are up for a very special conversation with our distinguished panelists right now. And I think that one of the things that you said, Dr. Burks, that resonated with me is, it's interesting how you can say something and Dr. Burks can say it even better than you. I would like for us to start with hope, and we're going to end with hope because the work that we do is so challenging. It can be frustrating at times. Yet, we're not only going to continue to do it, but we're going to find ways to make strides in the direction towards justice, in the direction towards liberation. And so, my first question to you is, what is giving you hope in this moment?
This is steady green.
I had it on.
Thank you. What's giving me hope is that my microphone works. So thank you so much for having me. I'm Christine, I'm the Executive Director of Tribal Haven. And what's giving me hope today is we're really getting to the issue of the groundwater. So I've been working with Tribal Haven for over 25 years, and it's an amazing organization. But as Sheila mentioned, our food pantry continues to get busier and busier. And I really hope for the day that we don't need the food pantry, or it certainly isn't something that people need on a weekly basis, and that we have that sustainable wages. And how we get there is it starts with all of us, right? It starts with me as a nonprofit leader paying that sustainable wage to my employees and leading by example.
Good morning, I'm Janet Kennedy. I'm with Loaves and Fishes of Contra Costa, and really what gives me hope is that I see partners here in the room. I'm part of a food security collaborative that is in Contra Costa County, and I've got partners in the room here from that collaborative, and we are all working on food insecurity and the fact that we support each other, and we're looking at, just like Ms. Sheila was saying, ways to get at the root causes. So that gives me hope that we're not in this alone, and we're trying to do what we can to make things better.
My name is John Boston, Executive Director of Open Heart Kitchen. I think what gives me hope today, very much inspired by the Hungarian elections, is that people are being reminded that they have power and claiming it, guarding it at all costs, realizing that the impact they were waiting on someone else to make that they themselves could be a part of, There are a lot of wonderful quotes from Brian Stevenson on hope. There's not a shortage of those. But one of my favorite ones comes from Jim Wallace, the founder of Sojourners, who said, hope is believing in spite of the evidence and then watching the evidence change. That's one that buoys me and supports me every day. So watching people step into their power, not assuming that there's someone out there coming to save us, and it's certainly easy not the government, that with collective power, we pack a punch. And so we stepping in and recognizing that we have more power than we ever imagined, and just simply claiming it and owning it.
That was awesome. Now, Christine, you mentioned wages. And from Dr. Burks' presentation, we all recognize that we live in one of the wealthiest regions, in the wealthiest country in the world. Now, if wages in our region would actually match the cost of living, and I know Dr. Burks, you don't like that cost of living term, how much of our current food insecurity would actually still exist?
That's a great question. So if wages in our region truly reflected the real cost of living, most of our food insecurity would disappear. It's not about a lack of food. It is about a lack of income that matches how much we pay for housing, that matches how much we pay for transportation, that matches how much we pay for childcare, that matches the necessities that we need every day. When work does not provide enough to sustain a household, food becomes the most flexible part of the budget that can be cut. From the perspective of Tribally Haven, many individuals and families who access our food pantries, our shelters, and our wraparound services are employed. Some of them have multiple jobs. The issue is not a lack of individual effort, but rather that wages have not kept pace with the cost of living in our region. So in Alameda County, as you all know, it is common for families to spend 50 to 70% of their income on rent alone. When that happens, again, food becomes that flexible part of the budget. Groceries are often the first thing to be reduced when an unexpected expense arises. A medical issue, a car payment, even a larger than expected utility payment. As a result, many working families rely on food pantries like Tribally Haven simply to bridge the gap between their paychecks and the true cost of living. If wages aligned with what it actually costs to live in Alameda County, many of these families would no longer need emergency food assistance. They'd be able to buy groceries, they'd be able to feed their children. At the same time, I think it is important to recognize that some level of food assistance will always be necessary. Survivors fleeing domestic violence, families experiencing job losses, medical crises, or other unexpected disruptions will always need a safety net. But the scale of that need would be dramatically reduced. In short, if wages reflected the true cost of living in the Tri-Valley region, food insecurity would shift from being a widespread structural challenge for working families to a more temporary form of support during times of crisis.
Now, I want to stay on this topic because I think you said something in it that was maybe shocking for folks, and how the number of folks who are working that you all are serving. So Jeanette, how many of the folks that you are serving are working, struggling with rent, and all of these other things that may be impeding their lives? And what does that say about the economy here in our country?
Well, it's a challenge, right? We at Loaves and Fishes of Contra Costa serve anyone, so our doors are open. And we don't take any intake, but we do a voluntary guest survey every couple of years to find out that data. And so what I do know is that more than half of the folks who use our services are working. And those folks are struggling to make ends meet for all the reasons that we heard here today. And I have some stats too. Ms. Sheila covered most of them. Even though we're a neighboring county, I think the median income rate is it's a couple thousand difference between our Contra Costa and Alameda. So it's very, very close. But what I wanted to share with you is a real life example. We have a family who came in and found us. She is the mom, they recently had a baby. Her name is Ashley, and her husband John had stayed home for the first 6 months of their baby's life because, as we saw on those stats, it's too expensive, right? He was going to pay all of his salary essentially or more to childcare. So he stayed home with the baby. She is a radiology tech, works for one of the large hospital systems, and she unfortunately after maternity leave went back to work and got injured. So she went on disability. Disability did not pay enough for them to survive, and they found lives vicious. So they were coming to us to get a hot and nutritious meal, which is what we provide, as well as groceries. And they were coming to us. They got a turkey for Thanksgiving, and just the nicest family. And thankfully she's back at work now. Disability's over, she's back at work, but we helped her make ends meet during that time. So bridging that gap. And really when she came back after she was working, and she said, is it okay if I come back, if we just maybe need it, a couple times a month or something, just to get some groceries, just to help us out? And we said, absolutely. I mean, this is what working families in this community are facing. So it's extremely challenging for working families.
But we appreciate the work that you're doing in supporting folks like this, so thank you for that. Now, John, you were quoted as saying that there's a food bank all over the place, right? Your local grocery store. I really love that quote. And so my question to you is, what would it look like if SNAP benefits, the places that allows folks to go shop at grocery stores, was actually more like insurance? When we think about insurance, right, we think about it as automatic, responsive, and adequate, rather than conditional and bureaucratic. What would that look like?
Yeah, so Reggie and I were talking earlier before we started this morning. We both have a love-hate relationship with our own programs. It's not uncommon to show up at a fancy fundraiser and tout our numbers, all these downstream metrics and measurements of scale and capacity. And if the metric was, let's do as much and provide as much as we can, and that were the only metric of success, then yeah, Alameda County Food Bank was, 26 million pounds before the pandemic, 62 million pounds food after the pandemic. Like, if these were our measurements, and we're wildly successful with the goal is to how do we shorten the line, and we're coming short of the mark. So, yes, SNAP, it was front and center again last fall around the government shutdown and the freeze there. I will say, as always, our communities have a way of getting it where the public sector doesn't. I think we saw a $200,000 to $250,000 bump in individual gifts in about a month, right? We met our individual fundraising goal. We're already done for the year. Don't tell anyone because you still need money. But our community gets it where sometimes our government doesn't. But I think, there's so many ways that we could restructure and think differently about SNAP. I don't trust to remember all of them, but some notes to share. When we talk about insurance, I'm talking about good insurance. I know we don't always think positively about insurance, but insurance that's automatic, shows up when we need it, is not the way when we don't. So basically, SNAP, if we can move away from what is clearly a program set up to be suspicious and punitive, into just another program that supports the infrastructure of our community and the infrastructure of people's lives, it would be automatic. It would be so much less application-based. It would be so much less if I miss a phone call or I change address and somehow that doesn't get changed and I'm not reached, or I forget to submit a pay stub, or I give an estimate, not the actual amount, that somehow I and my family are going to be kicked off of this, and it's going to take me forever, if I'm lucky, to get recertified. These 6-month recertifications that cause, which are essentially recertifications, we don't call them that. We call them sort of assessments at that point in time. Recertification happens at the 12-month mark. The kind of anxiety that this causes families, many of which are already living at the edge of their means and their mental capacity. It's just one more heavy lift and one more load that they have to raise. If we could index SNAP to housing and healthcare costs, if we could structure it when wages shrink, that SNAP automatically adjusts. If we could actually connect benefit costs to the actual local food prices of where people live and shop. If we could build in some sort of temporary boost, so we know that people are living one paycheck away from disaster with a car repair or a doctor's bill, if we could build that in to help absorb families with these short-term shocks. If hours are cut or a person's job is lost, benefits increase within days, not weeks. If rent or food prices rise, those benefits index up automatically. In 2022, that was the highest percentage, 88%, that HUD could claim that of all eligible SNAP recipients, it hit that mark. If we just made opting in, which SNAP largely is already, if we made it an automatic thing for everyone that's eligible, and you actually had to opt out of it if you chose not to, just imagine what that looks like. It gets rid of the bureaucratic red tape that throws people off. More than about 60% of people that lose SNAP benefits don't lose them because they're not eligible. They lose them for some stupid ass reason that is in the way of them getting what they need. So that 88% in 2022 essentially equates to about $88 billion is the cost for this. In fiscal year 26, it was $88 billion. That was 39 million people. That's $186 per person average each month. If we were to get to 100%, add that, it's only $12 billion more. And even if you control for another $1 billion in administrative costs, now we're up to an additional $13 billion to get everyone that qualifies for SNAP qualified and receiving the benefit, right? That's a 13-day supply of bombs, right? If we need to put it in those terms, right? $13 more billion for everyone to have to not deal with the nonsense, where you just hit this. Why not have this be a 2-year program? Why recertification at the end of 12 months? Why not make the money automatic? Why not build these absorption levers in when people are struggling? Why be so suspicious? Why penalize people so greatly when they fall off? Why make it so hard to come back on it? This is part of the system that's intended to kick people off. To say, look, our numbers for SNAP support went down. Look how much amazing job we're doing. It's kind of similar to saying, if we just don't test for COVID cases, COVID doesn't exist. These are folks that are kicked off from the facility of the program. Let's make it automatic. And when people say, let's cut programs like SNAP, let's not cut them, let's make them obsolete. It's a very different approach, right? It's exactly what you guys are saying.
And I really appreciated your answer and your academic language, like stupid ass reasons. I just really appreciated that because it was real and these reasons are stupid, right? And speaking on that topic, Christine, there are so many programs for folks. Are the challenges people are experiencing because of a lack of programs? Or is it because of the stupid ass reasons that create barriers for people to access the resources they need?
Yeah, I'm at the stupid ass. So a significant portion of the hardship that we see today is not due to not solely due to a lack of programs. It's really the barriers that prevent people from accessing those programs. So from Trinity Haven's perspective, many families are, navigating systems that are intended to help them, but they're difficult to enter at the moment that families need them the most. Eligibility requirements can be complex, documentation can be burdensome, and processes can be time-consuming. And this is really hard, especially people who are in crisis, need to be managing trauma, health challenges, low-paying jobs, and child care responsibilities. Transportation, we all know, is another barrier in our region. Services may exist, but they're not always geographically or logistically accessible to the people who need them. Language access, digital access, the ability to take time off work, all further compound the challenge of accessing services. We also see the impact of timing. Many safety net programs are structured in a way that require people to anticipate their own need, when in reality, most families seek help only after they've reached a breaking point. By that point, even a small barrier, missing paperwork, a phone call during work hours, or a delay in processing at a nonprofit can become the difference between stability and crisis. So while programs are essential and life-saving, the hardship that we often see is amplified by the friction in the system itself. How services are designed, how they are accessed, and how easily people can move through them in moments of urgency is so vital. The result is the support that they can access on paper. We might have that support on paper, but is still often not able to be reached in practice. And that gap between the availability and accessibility is where a great deal of preventative hardship exists. Thank you.
Please, Christine, earlier you talked about wages, and I'm going to pose a wage question to John. So John, at what point do low wages become a public subsidy problem where taxpayers are effectively covering what employers do not pay, and what are some solutions to address that?
Yeah, my fear is we've got to a point where we've built nonprofit support into the matrix. And we are subsidizing the failure of the market. We are subsidizing the failure of the public sector to provide for the general welfare of the citizenry. The moment we sort of acquiesce to that idea that we are now wholly a part of the system, simply to accommodate what sometimes are private payroll decisions. So I think Ms. Sheila referred to earlier, when we think about the folks that are coming in and doing our hair and making our food and turning down our beds at hotels at night, none of these folks live in the Tri-Valley. They travel from Turlock and Stockton and Tracy and Lathrop and Antigua and even farther out because they can't afford to live here. I think by looking at sectors that tend to not pay people, I won't use the word living wage, but to ensure what I think Sheila and I agree is economic stability, economic mobility, not living wage, which just seems to suggest for most people just the bare minimum grabbing hold of the bottom rung. I think if we could hold those sectors, which are the service industry, it's the restaurant industry, it's the retail industry that have a perennial track record of underpaying their folks, where they cannot live in the communities where they work and have to travel tremendous distances to get to where they're going at a cost, not only financially, but also mentally and emotionally. 2 hours, 3 hours on the road both ways. Maybe that's one of many jobs, no time spent with family. The cost to your physical and emotional health of making that commute every day. We ought to be able to pay people to not only work in our community, but to live in the communities where they serve. We talk about this with school teachers, which is a good start for the conversation, but our folks ought to be able to be part of the communities where they work and where they serve. I don't think we can continue to resist the urge to use pull market levers to address market failures. So when we think about housing, which I think is a basic human right, an essential good in all of our lives, but it's been turned into a commodity. I think legislation that targets how do we raise money on the cost of homes over $1 million that are sold in the Bay Area, which there's a lot of those sold. How do we pull money from that? How do we offset developers that don't want to build affordable housing? I think there are ways to remind our corporate partners that they all live and exist in communities. And that when their workers and employees do better, companies do better, communities do better, families do better. We are not siloed in this work. We are connected. And that there is a real ethical imperative to do right by the folks that work for them and not just use tax cuts to buy back stock, but to actually improve the lives, the salaries, the benefits of the folks that are making them rich, so that while they sleep, they make more and more money.
That was awesome, Joe. Thank you. Now, Janelle, we're going to talk about our sector, the nonprofit sector, a little bit. So, as a nonprofit that addresses food insecurity, is the system set up to solve problems or to absorb them? Have we accepted food banks, food pantries, food lines, food insecurity is just a part of the economy, as you talked about the matrix earlier?
Yeah, well, I think that, the community-based organizations here, as well as in the room, are really, really effective and good at accomplishing and meeting immediate needs. For example, the SNAP benefit delays. I mean, I know my food security collaborative and which involves the food bank up in Contra Costa and Solano, and all of the organizations, everybody stepped up. I mean, we do that really, really well, right? We're extremely effective. And I think that's unintentionally, I think, making people, accept the fact that, oh, this is okay. But don't take that, effectiveness as, that this is okay. It's not, right? We really do need to get at the root causes and many of what we talked about today. And so that's what's important, I think, is really getting and talking about it. I think everyone here, hearing this and really understanding it, I think having, the collaboration and the community-based organizations that are working together, we can meet those needs of our community, but we need to also address these systemic issues and come together and solve those issues, because we, although we're so good at it, we just can't keep doing it, right? We don't want this to be 40 years from now. So we need to address these issues. We need to come together and solve them, and see how we can accomplish something better. That's what I'm hoping for. So yeah.
Thank you so much. Now, you all have done so well with this line of questioning that you get to go to the bonus round. So we are going to do some rapid fire questions. You ready? So as we think of serving justice on the table, what would you say is politically difficult but economically obvious? What are we avoiding?
So,
rapid fire.
Yes, really quick. We were having our last meeting yesterday afternoon at 3 o'clock for sort of the final run through for today. And I was sitting in my car in front of our board chair's home, lovely home of Pleasant, because she was about to host this small group donor event for 8 to 12 people. These are people with extraordinary needs. And I had put together this slide deck, and there was a lot of economist level kind of stuff in there. And I shared with my friend what I was going to talk about. It's like, I'm going to be talking to a lot of rich people and just sort of making them very uncomfortable. And he's like, why do you want to do that? I'm like, well, if I can't talk to rich people about rich people problems, I'll change it. I don't know who we're supposed to talk to. So one of the graphs that I shared was from 1975 to roughly to 2025, looking at a graph in terms of wages, which have remained relatively flat. We know the minimum wage has been ridiculously low for decades now, and then watching the second line just go literally off the TV screen. I didn't have enough space above it to go. Essentially, from 75 to 2025, around 3.6 trillion to 3.9 trillion dollars lost in wages. So over the span of 50 years, almost $80 trillion. And so someone in that room could say, yeah, I don't understand the problem, right? because I think the way we treat wealth consolidation and concentration is it's a small sort of data set. It doesn't have any bearings on how we pay our people. But if we're not paying our people and expenses continue to go up, it's not like if we see a pay cut that all of a sudden globally expenses come down. At the end of the day, our problem is not really even about food insecurity or housing insecurity or healthcare insecurity. It is a math problem that does not math, where certain categories of a family's budget just cease to exist. And so watching how poorly labor does in the face of such unprecedented wealth concentration and consolidation. Right now, we live in a country where the richest 400 people own the equivalent wealth of the bottom 50%, 165 million people. Right? We have a problem now where for that federal poverty level of $33,000, which is roughly 39 million people in America would fall under that low or extremely low category. What we never talk about is the next group up the politicians talk about on the campaign trail, the working class. I'm here for the working class. Those folks live in poverty too. But if we tell the truth about those folks, then our rate of 39 million Americans living below the federal poverty level jumps up to somewhere between 90 to 120 million, which is 1/3 of the US population. And who wants to talk about that? You're not going to get elected if you talk about that. But that's the truth. We have a ton of people living on poverty, though we're not going to talk about living in poverty, but who cannot make ends meet, who need to make somewhere between 230, 300% AMI. When we look at these numbers that Sheila shared, to even grab hold of that quote-unquote living wage, it's not sustainable, it's not tenable. That's our problem. Until we can figure out this wage expense issue, we will continue to spiral.
Exactly.
Hi, Reggie.
Hello.
Hi, friends. Hi. Is that me? It's a little warm.
What responsibilities, public policy, should be implemented for employers and developers to address reducing community level poverty?
Well, I'll try to answer some of it. We talked about wages. I think, housing, obviously, it's just being able to afford the cost of living here, right? So if you're not making enough, you can't afford your rent, the cost of rent, and there isn't any housing available, right? So it just snowballs. And 3.3% inflation rate, it is just an ongoing issue. I also, we talked a little bit about the SNAP or the CalFresh, or, which we call it here in California. And, I believe that those numbers and those guidelines were established 50 years ago. We looked at the poverty level. Things should be adjusted for the places where people are living. Obviously, Tri-Valley, we've got Contra Costa County. These are one of the most expensive places to live, and yet those thresholds and those percentages are based on a median for the entire United States, where there's a lot of different cost of living and cost for expenses, right? We live in one of the highest costs in America. And so I think we need to address those issues so that not only what John was saying in terms of making it easier for people to stay on and not provide so many barriers to staying on something that they qualify for, but also making sure that we are providing them with accessible food at the cost that they need to pay. If you're only getting $188 a month in SNAP benefits, how are you going to make ends meet? You just can't do it, and with the cost of living. So I think it just snowballs with all of the various costs that we're experiencing, people who are trying to make ends meet there. I think that housing needs to be improved so that we have more housing, affordable housing, wages need to increase, we need to lessen the barriers for people who need assistance.
Now, to close us out, I would love for each of you to share. When I look out in this crowd, I see a bunch of folks who are about that action, as I like to say. they're ready to move on something. What are the upstream policies that could significantly reduce food security within the next 3 to 5 years that we can put people to work on?
Well, I'm going to hand this over to some folks who do policy, but I do think, in terms of SNAP benefits, I think that's a huge area where people can get behind. I know that a lot of the local food banks have policy and advocacy work, and so I just encourage, at Loaves and Fishes, we just want to make sure that you have access to people who are doing this work and information, so I just encourage you to find that information. And I strongly believe in SNAP benefits, and I think those need to be reformed, and so I'm seeing Brian from our food bank, and he can certainly help, but I'll let, who wants to?
Thank you. So I think that, as Sheila mentioned, like, we don't have all the answers, and it's gonna take all of us. So be engaged. I think, again, with livable wages or sustainable wages, it's gonna take all of us. It needs to start with the nonprofits. I know that, a lot of us have employees that have to drive over the hill to work in the Tri-Valley. So it needs to start with us. I also think, talking to the people who utilize our services, what are the barriers that they are facing? And how can we make all of our programs more accessible? Those are some of the things that we can start to do, but listening to our communities and not realizing that we do not have all the answers.
Yeah, I think at a minimum, we've got to connect wages and expenses. The pace we're on now, it's not sustainable. So if folks are allergic to talking about universal basic income, which has plenty of data to talk about the merits of it, then let's do an earned income tax credit every month, not just once a year. That's a way of leveling and stability, creating stability for families there. As Ms. Sheila said, we saw the poverty rate go down for the first time in 60 years. Why? It wasn't magic fairy dust. It was levers that we know we can pull that can only, when we talk about revolutionary change, it has to happen at the very top, right? We as smaller nonprofits, we recognize we're somewhat limited in terms of our policy changes. We shouldn't be great advocates and pass that by. We need champions and fighters on our behalf to do that work at higher levels. But if we don't have an income floor, we don't stand a chance of being able to do this work. Obviously, so much of the food insecurity debate is really a housing insecurity debate. It is an economic insecurity debate. It is a math problem. It's not mathing. Food insecurity is tied to a lack of a health security guarantee. We need universal health care. We should not have the Hunger Games at the clinic or at the emergency room or the doctor's office. There are better ways to do this. There are examples out there in the world where it's already happening. As we already said, SNAP's got to be automatic. It's got to be locked in. We still have to figure out a way to reduce wealth. If people want to make money, when that money is derived by value produced at the community level, somehow that money has to stay in the community. That's where the extraction is happening. And this is where communities are suffering because they are not at the table. They're at the table making the money, but when it's time to cash the check, they're not at the table anymore. So we've got to figure out a way to do that. And we've got to design systems that can absorb the shocks that families experience. When we talk about working ourselves out of a job, I don't want to work myself out of a job. I want to work myself into a different job. I think there will always need to be a need for a social service sector because life happens and it's messy and we are vulnerable creatures. There's always going to be a need to connect people from point A to point B, but we can do it much better. We can do it more humanely. We can do it with much more dignity, where folks are actually subjects in this story and not just merely objects.
Love that. Please give it up for esteemed panelists. Thank you so much, you all. And as we transition our panelists off stage, I would like to introduce our final speaker. So today, our final speaker is going to be Jared Call. Come on up here, brother. He is the Director of Public Policy and Advocacy for California Food Banks, which is the state network of all the California food banks in the state. He has worked for over 10 years to advance anti-hunger policy solutions at the local, state, and federal levels, with much of his work focused on improving access and participation in the CalFresh program. Please welcome Jared Call.
Thanks, everybody. I am Jared. I am not Dr. Sheila Burks.
Nobody is.
Thanks for giving me the toughest act to follow. We're going to have a little housekeeping in my presentation up here. Just a quick temperature check. How many people here have ever been in like a lobby meeting or an advocacy meeting with a state legislator? Okay. Oh, sorry. That'll help engage the room a little bit. I do want to thank Dr. Sheila Burks again and the panel for setting the stage so well. So much of what has already been said, I now don't have to say. But I think the headline really is that hunger is a policy choice. And I'm here to tell you that advocacy works in changing those policies that can impact how our friends and neighbors are able to put enough food on the table. I am here's plan for today. We're going to learn a little bit about anti-hunger advocacy in California. I do want to start again with a message of hope and end with a message of hope, but fair warning, there will be some bad news in the middle. But I am going to share some stories of recent success at the California state level. I'm going to focus mostly on California, on Sacramento, what we're doing there. If you have questions about what's happening federally, I can put up the slide of the dumpster fire, and we can talk about that as well. And then I really am going to talk about some upcoming, again, challenges, but some opportunities, what we're advancing in Sacramento right now, and how you can lend your voice to help in those efforts and change some of those policies for the better. Just a little bit, I think Reggie did a good job already of introducing me and what our organization does. We have 43 member food banks. We also have a mission to end hunger in California, just like the Alameda County Community Food Bank, one of our members does. We work very closely with these members. My job is to lead the policy efforts throughout the state. We also have a strong CalFresh outreach program. We're going to talk a little bit about that. I know Brian's here. He can talk about that. Get him up here. And we also have a farm-to-family program. And we're going to talk a little bit about the importance of that program, which at the state level is called CalFood, and the funding for that being at risk and that being one of our highest priorities given what's coming up in the next few months in terms of SNAP cuts. So I asked the question about who had a meeting with a legislator. If you didn't raise your hand, have you ever asked somebody for help? Who could help you? Same thing. And don't take it from me. There's somebody with a lot more credibility than me who feels the same way. I have a 4-year-old son. He loves Daniel Tiger, and I keep trying to tell him, Daniel Tiger's dad. So if you don't know this quote, when I was a boy and I would see scary things in the news, that resonated with everybody, my mother would say to me, look for the helpers. You will always find people who are helping. And that's who you are. You're all here because you are helpers. And we want to communicate with the people in Sacramento, and if possible, the people in DC who can help as well. And that's all really that advocacy is. Why advocacy matters? Again, hunger is a policy choice. It's just that simple. Budget requests, bills, those shape the resources and the restrictions that impact the programs that serve the people who need help putting food on the table. They impact local communities from the state level down, and obviously from the federal government down. And I really do, we've had a lot of bad policy passed at the federal level when it comes to helping people meet their basic needs in the past year and a half. But advocacy can change policy for the better. I really want to carry that message forward, and that's what we're going to be fighting for. And then, less so, I think, among this group, but I was just at a conference in Dallas of Feeding America food banks. And I heard a lot from advocates and food bank operators in other states, and there really is a problem nationally with the hunger narrative about deserving people and undeserving people, rather than everybody needs a little help sometimes, and everybody has the right to have enough food to eat. So I mentioned the legislative cycle, but it's really important when I share what we're working on. A lot of what we do at the state level nowadays, over the past 6-8 years, has been done through the state budget process. And that's the part of the process in California that they didn't teach you about in Schoolhouse Rock. You'll see things, I mean, all of you are probably on some listservs, you'll get calls to action, things like that. Don't ignore those ones that say this is about a budget request and there's no bill number. It can be confusing. The budget process is a little more behind closed doors because there aren't as many public hearings about the proposals being advanced. But more and more, not just funding, but actual policy is accomplished through the state budget. And that's because this governor and the last governor had a preference for that. The bottom line is they have a little more control over the process in the budget. But that's where they want to see things done. If you look at veto statements over the past 5 or 6 years for bills that had some cost, a lot of them will say, essentially, I, the governor, I love this idea. It's a great idea. I support it. Bring it back next year and do it in the budget. And so that's why we use that strategy now a lot more often. It's just a way of getting things done. So don't ignore the state budget process. It's also important to know we do a lot of great work that's outside of the legislative process. That's administrative advocacy, particularly with the Department of Social Services. We are fortunate here in California to have a fantastic Department of Social Services. The person who is the SNAP state director, the head of CalFresh there, used to have my job. She gets it. She understands. And they are doing, we're going to talk a little bit about the SNAP cuts from HR1, the one big, beautiful boondoggle. And they're doing everything they can to implement those cuts with an eye on harm mitigation. And so working with them closely and building those relationships is almost as important as passing new bills or getting funding in the budget. It's also, again, it's been said, but it's really important for legislators to hear directly from their constituents and from their community members. I can actually go to the next slide with that. We'll talk a little bit about strategic advocacy timing later. I'll have a timeline of some upcoming points of impact in the legislative process. But the source of your power really is to translate what's happening on the ground to those legislative leaders. They need to hear from you. And I'm here to tell you they really do listen. When you call them and tell them, this is a problem, I know about a solution, it's Bill XYZ, whoever's talking to you, that staff member is writing that down, putting it on a list, and taking it to the meeting on Friday with their member. They keep hash marks in their cubicles about who's calling about what. They really, really do. So every call does matter. And you're the one who can really paint the picture, as well as bringing in people who have that experience with living with hunger and poverty. They don't get to hear that as often as they need to. So as much as possible, we try to bring people who are directly impacted by the policy decisions we're discussing into the room. And Brian knows about this. We're going to have a big lobby day on Tuesday. We're going to bring some people up. And then it is important to have a clear advocacy request. You don't just want to present a problem. You do want to be in there to talk about something that's actually moving through the legislative process and give them action to take. All right, we're going to do some recent wins before we go into what's coming up. That's why defending our progress or protecting our progress is a really big point of emphasis this year in Sacramento, given everything that's happened at the federal level. But I mentioned it was at the PD America conference, and advocates from other states were going around the table explaining what was happening in their states, and I shared. We were talking about trying to get summer EBT, or the Sunbucks program, going in their states, and we've had that since the beginning. People are familiar with that program. Yeah, it provides grocery money for families when their kids are out of school. And I said, yeah, well, in California we're working on a simplified application because we might, lose some people due to the SNAP cuts that will be automatically qualified. But we have summer EBT, and we have universal school meals, and I got laughed out of the room, basically. People were like, oh, California, that's so great. They need to see Dr. Burks' presentation, right? But that was a really huge win. I also want to talk a little bit about some of the CalFresh changes, particularly for older adults and people with disabilities John and the panel were talking about those 6-month recertifications. We were able to get rid of those for older adults and people with disabilities. They now have to recertify every 3 years, which is still something, but at least a 3-year window. And they don't have to do that required interview, which is very onerous for a lot of people to have to do. So we're keeping more and more older adults and people with disabilities connected to CalFresh once we can get them on. It's also the case that prior to 2019, if you were on SSI, you couldn't get CalFresh in California. We were the only state still holding on to that kind of outdated policy. We changed that in 2019. So we made some improvements in the CalFresh program. I talked about Sunbucks. Is anybody here familiar with the Food for All campaign? It's a campaign that I helped launch when I was at Nourish, California, prior to coming to the Association of Food Banks. And that is a pretty simple idea. Let's give food benefits to everybody who needs it, regardless of their immigration status. We have a strong history of doing that in California. In 1996, it wasn't nearly as big a change as what I'm going to discuss related to the HR1 SNAP changes, but a subset of lawfully present immigrants was made ineligible for SNAP. California stood up and said, we don't agree with that. If we pay for the benefits, can we continue to keep them on the rolls? It's just not have the feds pay for it. The feds agreed. We've had a program since 1997. It's called California Food Assistance Program. That's been helping about 55,000 households across the state continue to get CalFresh benefits. The program's the same. They go, they apply. The only difference is on the back end of which bank account is hooked up to those EBT cards. So the idea there is let's expand that to everybody, not just that narrow subset. And we're going to talk about using that mechanism for people who are impacted by HR1 in just a minute. And then finally, the Cal Food program, or that farm to family program. That's something we were able to get more funding for last year than in previous years. Part of that was due to recognizing those cuts to SNAP were coming, but also people remember the government shutdown in November. And food banks really rose to the challenge when those SNAP benefits were delayed. So we've been able to get good things done, and we're going to need to keep doing that. Because, as people are probably aware, HR1 includes the largest cuts to SNAP in the program's history. CDSS is estimating that number, about 737,000 people, will likely lose their benefits over the next year. I'll go back to the Feeding America conference. Advocates in Arizona implemented this, or the state implemented these changes in November of last year, and they've seen a 47% decline in their SNAP caseload, so almost half. If that were to happen in California, that'd be 2.5 million people. So again, it's good we have the people that we have in place at the state. Department of Social Services, who are taking a more thoughtful approach. They've waited as long as possible to implement these cuts, but we're still looking at a really significant impact. This started earlier this month. On the 1st of April, the rules were changed for about 72,000 people in the state who are immigrants. These are refugees and asylees who were promised a place in this country, told that we would support them, and now have had the rug pulled out from under them in terms of federal food assistance. We'll talk about how these cuts are going to play out in a couple of slides. But then the much bigger group, this is going to start on June 1st. This goes back to the administrative burden and the unnecessary red tape disguised as work requirements that really just serves to cut people off the program. Starting June 1st, people will have to prove to their county social services office that they're working or volunteering or some combination 80 hours per month. If they can't prove that proactively, they'll only receive 3 months of SNAP in a 3-year period. There is no, I want to be clear about this, there is no correlation between these types of rules. These are not new rules. These started in 1996 as well. California has been able to be exempt, had a statewide waiver from applying these rules. What HR1 did was change the criteria for receiving those waivers, so they're virtually impossible to secure a waiver from the rule, which is why we're implementing them now in almost every county. There is no correlation between these types of rules and enhanced employment outcomes. It only serves to cut people off because of that extra red tape. If you think of maybe a single parent who's got a couple of teenagers in the home, for the first time this will also impact households who have kids above age 14. got 2 teenagers in the home, maybe they work as a server or a delivery driver or for a rideshare platform or something, but they have no control over their weekly schedule, right? Business goes down at the restaurant they're a server at, they get their hours cut back to 19 hours a week, they lose their food assistance. It's a terrible rule. And the way this is going to play out is it's not all at once. People will be screened for whether they're meeting this work requirement, time limit, or meet an exemption at their time of that annual recertification. Same is true for the refugees and asylees who are going to be cut off. So each month, you'll see this growing wave. And then a year and 3 months from June 1st, we could see that big number of about 700,000 people who did have federal food assistance no longer have it. I told you it would be kind of depressing in the middle. All right, what are we going to do about it? These are some of our key legislative priorities in the association. There are a lot of bills around hunger this year. The legislature recognizes the crisis that we're facing. So if people have heard about other proposals or bills and you want to ask me about those, either if we have time during the session or afterward, I'm happy to offer you our thoughts. We're supporting a lot of things that we're not necessarily leading because we just don't have the capacity to do everything. Our number one strategy here is, first we want to keep as many people on CalFresh as possible. We don't want to be Arizona, right? We want to meet people where they're at, do those effective screenings for exemptions, and try to match people with qualifying activities that will help them stay connected to CalFresh. But second, we're going to see some people fall off, a good number of people fall off. And in the absence of big programmatic systemic changes that take some time, we're going to need to fund food banks. I agree 100% that hunger is not a matter of charity, it's a matter of justice. In this crisis, we're going to have to buttress our food bank network right away. And that's why our priority ask is for that Cal Food program to increase the baseline, which is now $8 million a year. That's a 90% cut from what food banks received last year. That's what's in the governor's budget right now, $8 million if we don't act. We need to raise that baseline to $60 million ongoing, and then we've calculated what we think our network can help address due to those HR1 cuts, and that's another $50 million in one-time funding. So that's our first ask. And then looking to connecting more people, that second bullet point about CalFresh outreach and application assistance. How many people are familiar with CalFresh outreach and application assistance? These are people from the community who help people get through the application process and stay connected. That was also cut in HR1. So we need the state to fill that hole. It's only about $14 million, which is not a lot in the context of the state budget. But that first bullet point under HR1 policy response is what I really want to talk about as well. I talked about this California Food Assistance Program that provides benefits to a certain subset of immigrants that we want to expand to everyone who is ineligible due to immigration status. We want to use that same program to get benefits who are cut off due to these HR1 provisions. So the idea is really simple. In California, we clearly have different values that are being expressed through the federal government. If we don't agree with it, we'll take it on and we'll take care of our own. And that is AB 2299, but it's also a budget request because we know how things get done. I won't spend too much time on the last one. That's one that benefits farmers and food banks. And it is, frankly, sailing through the process. So if you have to pick one, you can see that one. I won't tell our sponsor. So these are just some upcoming dates. I think people will get these slides, so we can, there are a number of lobby days coming up. I know ACCFD has a flyer for Hunger Action Day, which is our big anti-hunger statewide coalition lobby day. That's next Tuesday. If you want to come up, that is always a rollicking good time. Wear your orange, that's our anti-hunger colors. But I want to leave some time for this. If you have your phone and you would like to do the very easy thing of scanning one of those QR codes, and again, we'll send these slides out after. The first one is that food bank funding for Cal Food. And then the second one is changing the California Food Assistance Program to expand it to anybody who's ineligible for SNAP benefits solely due to bad federal policies. And the third one is to support our budget request to preserve the CalFresh Outreach Network. And I have a after that, when we head out the slides, you'll see I have some resources from our website where you can look up some of these impacts by the county as well. Our research and data team is fantastic, so if you need to go to your local assembly person or senator and say this is what's happening in our county, we have that data.
Thank you so much for that. As well. So we're not going to do, we don't have time for Q&A because I'm a person who wants to get you out on time, but you should feel free to go over and corner Jared afterwards and ask him all the questions you like, all right? So hopefully you're scanning here to get the information to get involved. So James and I are going to do the closing now, and I'm going to turn it over to James, who is our co-chair on our anti-poverty club.
Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to see you all here this morning. James Paxton, and I'm on the TVNPA board, and as Estelle mentioned, I'm also help with the Anti-Poverty Collaborative. I want to do some quick thank yous here. First of all, to all of our panelists. Jared, yes, John, Christine, and I want to give a really special thanks to Dr. Sheila Burks. And it just goes without saying, but I'm going to say it anyway. One of the things that has happened over the last, say, 4 to 5 years, as the Anti-Poverty Collaborative was brought under the umbrella of Tri-Valley Nonprofit Alliance, we have been having fundamentally different conversations. The conversation that happened in this room today, the conversations that we've been having around the collaborative have changed significantly. And Dr. Burks has been front and center with that, and I cannot express my appreciation for the work and the time and dedication that she's given to us in this region. It's truly valuable and it's inspiring, so thank you so much for that. I want to give another quick shout out to Kathy Young and Marty Sutton. Their leadership and vision has been absolutely inspiring. But I want to thank all of you. Your most valuable asset is your attention and your sorry, I lost the word. There's not enough coffee this morning. Your attention and your attention. And you provided us with both of those this morning. And those are really important. You don't show up for things like this unless you really care. And I really appreciate the fact that you've given some time to this and accept and understand the imperative of what's being discussed this morning. So my one call to action for all of you is, I want to expand the room of people who are sharing this imperative with us. So I would ask each one of you, if you can get somebody to sign on to the TVNPA social media platform, tell somebody else about this presentation, share the materials, invite them to another Anti-Poverty Collaborative event. That's how we really start to make the systemic change that's being discussed here, is to bring more people into the conversation. So again, thank you all very much, and I'm now going to turn it over to Estelle.
You all give yourselves a round of applause for showing up on a Friday conversation. So you heard a lot today. We don't want you to leave. We're creating a movement. Critical mass is 1%. 1% rolling that ball to create change, and that's what each one of you represent here today. So we want you to take a moment to think about what you heard, and we have a little fun activity for you. So we want you to scan the QR code once again, and we're going to do a word cloud. It's going to come up on the computer. And my tech assistant. And while we're doing that, I want to thank our sponsors for this event, Sandia Laboratories, Technological Laboratories, and Patalco for allowing us to use this fantastic space. So once again, give a round of applause to our sponsors. And so we want you to think of one word that you would use and take away about how you feel, an action item from today's event. Right? Because we want you to think about what you can do, and
Just one word, not a sentence, because we're creating a wonderful word cloud, you all. That's how we're going to end today.
We're gonna get the website.
Sure. So I had something prepared, but I go into that while I do that. So you heard a lot today that hunger in America is not about scarcity of food, it's about affordability and the lack of sustainable income, as Dr. Sheila Burks likes us to call it. This is all the result of policy choices. I want you to hear that. These are policy choices. Policies are made by us, men. So we have the ability to change policy. From what we heard today, full-time workers wouldn't need a food bank if wages were truly sustainable. In a county where rent exceeds, you heard today, $2,000. Housing costs are the #1 causes of food insecurity. When rent rises, what did you hear? Food is the first thing to be cut, right? We heard from our speakers about how food security is directly correlated to income and housing. That's the intersectionality of poverty that we need to address. We can also throw in childcare. Childcare is a huge barrier for our families. We know that SNAP program, I'm a person of acronyms, I don't assume everybody knows the acronyms. SNAP is the Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Program, provides 9 meals for every 1 meal a food bank provides. So why does it matter? This is how change matters. That's why you hear a lot of support for expanding SNAP. Therefore, as Jared mentioned, we should be strengthening our safety net programs, not cutting them. As recently proposed in the president's budget is to cut WIC. I don't know if you've heard this on the news, but that's the Women and Infants Child Supplemental Program, to cut the nutrition, now this is fresh food, by 75%. However, you heard them say that we want you to eat more fresh foods. So now it's on the table to cut them by 75% for women, infants, and children. Unacceptable. Yet our safety net programs are continuing to be reduced while demand continues to rise. I like to say this is a yes and. Yes, we need to continue supporting our food banks, and we need to dismantle the system that has created this in the first place. This is where your voice matters. You can make a difference, so join us in this movement, y'all, to reframe the issue of hunger, as you heard, and food security, and get involved. Not later, today. Think of one actionable item that you can do, sign a letter, call your legislator. We ask you to take one thing from today's session and commit to getting involved, because collectively, each one of us can make a big difference. And on that note, we would like to ask you to participate in our final, here we are, word cloud activity. And you are, once again, after hearing from our speakers and panelists, please share a word that stands out. Perhaps a source of hope. You heard hope is our through line today. A goal to work towards, or a focal point for future advocacy. And what do we have going on? You guys have all participated? Stupid ass policy. And you can see the words that get bigger are the ones that more than one person has assignment to. So collaboration, universal income. You know, we put on these forums of every 2 a year. So we're thinking about universal basic income. I helped launch the one in Oakland, so that may be something that is a nice pivot or caveat to our next conversation. Hope, liberation. We're going to be liberated. We're liberating everyone through our actions. Community, change, empower justice, advocacy, action, reparations. So once again, give yourself a round of applause. And I do have any on the dot, so thank you again. Kathy, do you have any final words? All right, feel free to take some. Make sure you network. The biggest thing about being involved in this, introduce yourself to 3 people you do not know. It's really hard.